The losses that I probably have had in my leadership is when I've held things too tightly.
How do you stop your identity being tied up in what you do?
When you're in the pit, it's too late to dig a well.
Welcome back to the YA Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Rafaro, and we're joined today by Pastor Hannah Adkins.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome, Rafaro.
Yeah, come on. I don't actually know when this episode will come out, but we do have a Christmas tree here. So that's a bit of a clue as to when we're filming.
When we filmed it, yeah.
It's all right. Pastor Hannah Adkins, many people might know of you, but maybe they don't know you.
Okay.
And we want to get to know you on the podcast today.
Yeah, sure.
And you are what I describe as the quintessential example of the daughter of a house.
Oh, good. Okay, I was
Yeah.
wondering what you're going to say then. Yeah.
Oh, no insults here. We'll save those for after the camera.
Yeah.
And that just like you've grown up with the church. Like Audacious is Hannah, Hannah is Audacious.
True.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, here from the start. So
Yeah.
me and my husband met in Sheffield, and I was doing the equivalent of Audacious College in Sheffield when I
Right.
met him. Saw him across the room. And
Ooh.
yeah.
We don't have time to do it.
No, we
know about
don't.
this.
We were on the same
Across the
youth team
room.
together, and we ran a age group together, and we were just friends for a while.
Listen, if you're looking for somebody,
Get
join
on
a
a team.
number one, and look across the room.
Just look across the room and see them, catch their eye. And then we, the year we got married in the December, on the 23rd of December, 2 days before Christmas. Yeah.
Okay, why?
A mixture of, we knew we were going to be planting Audacious.
Right.
There was lots of things kind of happening at the time, and we knew that we were going to be going across in January
Sure.
to start planting Audacious.
Okay, makes sense.
Church in Manchester, so we were in Sheffield. So we were like, we would really love to start that journey kind of married, so we can get a house, et cetera, et cetera. And then we started looking at dates, and we couldn't find any venue that was available at the beginning of December. And then one of the hotels said, we've got the 23rd, but I guess you wouldn't want that. And I was like, I'll take it. So
is the wedding more expensive or cheaper in that close to Christmas?
I think probably the same, probably similar price, but I think you get a lot of perks.
Sure.
So we got to pick the venue colours for their Christmas decorations
Great.
around our
Wow.
wedding, but we didn't pay for them, they did. So in some ways it was kind of like,
Favor.
favour. And then we went on honeymoon to Australia for
Great.
a month, which was great. And then we came and planted the church. We started driving over to Manchester with the team. There was like 12 of us that came with Pastor Glenn and Sophia. And our first year of marriage was planting this church.
Come on.
So it's like there's enough going on in the first year of your marriage as there is, because you're like, oh, who did I marry? What the heck's going on? And then also we were just like, making this thing work.
Come on, that's amazing.
It was a great year.
But so were you our first youth pastor?
No, actually we weren't. So Wayne and I came across, and I was already working for Audacious, running the conferences. So I ran the Audacious conference.
And what age was this?
How old was I?
Yes.
Pastor Glenn employed me when I was 20.
20.
So I was running the Audacious conferences when I
Wow.
was 20, got married at 21. And then two young guys don't get married at 20. I'm not going to let my kids get married at 21.
Do as I say, not as I do.
A little bit. And then, I came over, and I was primarily doing that, but also volunteering like you do. So you work part and volunteer part doing schools work. And Pastor Mark and Emily Foster were our youth pastors.
Great.
And then, as you said, me and Wayne became the youth pastors kind of quite quickly after that.
Wow.
So I've been here since the beginning.
Since the very beginning, like I said, daughter of the house. And I love that. I'm like, I listened to a podcast by Craig Rochelle, brilliant podcast on leadership. And he talked about Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3 leaders.
Sure.
And it's nothing to do with like Gen X, Gen Alpha, millennials. It's nothing to do with that. It's like the stage at which he's talking about leadership in church and organization, but it can apply to anything really. and he was talking about if Pastor Glenn is like a Gen 1 leader, like the pioneer, the front facing, like having to do a lot with very little kind of thing, you'd probably be an example of like people who are like almost are born in and grafted in like at the day one of the house. So you'd be like Gen 2. And myself being in Gen 3, we've come late. We've got all the perks. We've got like a corporate card. We've got like a company car.
Yeah,
we get,
you're like
you know,
standing on our
leave.
shoulders.
Yeah, annual leave. I get a bonus. All of this great stuff where like you start with like, hey, we've got a vision, a dream, and faith.
Yeah, that was it. And we were doing everything. Like, I know lots of people still are doing everything, but I mean, we're talking seriously. We were setting up Sundays.
Yeah.
We were doing the Sunday services. We were painting walls. We were then putting kids team t-shirts on, getting in the kids church, and then running youth on Friday night. And at first, Pastor Glenn, we were all on every team. So all all our core team turned up on Friday night for youth. Everybody did youth. Everybody did Sunday mornings. And it was, that's where like the DNA, it was like a hothouse of DNA of who we were. Which I know the perks for maybe you, as you would talk about maybe being third generation. I think the perks for us was just that beginning, being there at the beginning, and all the DNA and everything that was sewn into us really, really early on, and the relationships that we've literally had for 18 years. Some of these guys have been doing ministry with them now.
Craig Rochelle defines Gen 2, which what you'd be as like the protectors. Protectors, the guardians of that vision. We might link actually that episode in our description. Can check it out. I think it's a brilliant resource because it talks about how you can adopt that thinking to, you know, finance. You can adopt that thinking to, you know, like marriage, like whole marriage instead of like divorce and all that kind of thing. It's brilliant. It applies to lots of things. It's really good. The conversation we're having today is really, I guess, about leadership. And you kind of like our example of like what great leadership is like. I've been blessed to be under your leadership and just grown a ton. And I know many of our young adults in our church here at Audacious have like either directly or vicariously through somebody else you're leading have really benefited. So let me just take this opportunity to say thank you on behalf of the entire young adults ministry for just leading us so well. Setting a great example. We love it.
My pleasure.
But I don't know, before we get into like the meat of the conversation, what are some like some L's? This is what the kids talk about. You got L's in the chat, you got W's, which are your wins. What are some wins and losses, some lessons, some glories that you've got from
leading?
Yeah, from
over
leadership.
The years.
Yeah.
I think linking directly in with what you were just talking about in terms of being here at the beginning, I think one of the things that, I mean, a win or a loss, maybe just a lesson, is you can be a kind of a guardian or a protector of the DNA, but what comes with that is this responsibility for also releasing people. So otherwise the difference between churches and or organizations, I think, that grow with the second generation releasing is the releasing of the third. And I think one of the lessons I've learned is I can be a guardian, but I can't hold it too closely. Like, RFR, I know how this works, so I'll do this. I think the lessons and the losses that I probably have had in my leadership is when I've held things too tightly and I've not we would call it like delegated, but handed on stuff because either fear of that person getting it wrong or the fear of it making me look bad because I released somebody too quickly.
All that kind of stuff,
And actually the key that we've learned over time with Pastor Glenn and Sophia is that you have to release people. And the win is not doing it all yourself to make sure everything is perfect and right. The win is training people and coaching people to be excellent and do it excellently. And you can show them. And I think the only way to move forward from being that kind of person who we've been doing everything is just releasing people. So losses are times where I've looked back and I thought I could have done a better job, not at doing the job, but at releasing people. Other people to do the job and have the opportunity I was given to do that. Wins, just when I've released people, I think. When I've listened to God, obedience to God above all else. There's been times where I've moved on from different roles and things like that. And I think there's times when you know you should move on from roles, but you don't want to move on.
A little bit too tightly.
And I think listening to God.
How do you stop your identity being tied up in what you do? Like not authorally, how do you personally?
How do I personally do it? I think you have to continuously be rooted and established in God's love.
Oof, that was good.
Okay, so who I am isn't really up for grabs because I already know who I am. And who I am is first and foremost a worshiper.
Come on.
The way in which I worship will change over time.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm called into ministry and I work for the church, but this is the same. If you don't work for church, first and foremost, you're a worshiper. And sometimes that worship has looked like youth ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it looked like working the operational
Yeah.
side of things and running conferences. Sometimes it's looked like being on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's looked like being behind stage. And because I'm a worshiper, and that's where my identity is, I have to just keep going back to that. So when my role changes, I wasn't that.
Yeah.
The way in which I'm worshiping God has changed. The way in which I'm serving God has changed. But that isn't who I am.
Yeah, the identity is the same. The ethos is the same.
Yeah.
The outworking of it
That's
is the only thing
right.
that changes.
And I guess that's, I know what my gifts are. So I would encourage people to know what their gifts are and their skills are. Proverbs says the gift makes way for a giver. Give your gift.
Come on.
And give it willingly. A gift is only a gift if it's given. Somebody takes a gift, it's not a gift, is it? It's been stolen. So you have to give it willingly. And I think the where I've given my gift has changed over the time. And, make it sound like I've never had, a wobble. Of course, I've had who am I? And what, when I had children, that was a big deal. Who am I? Am I going to come back to my job? What's going to happen? And I just have to come back to, I am a worshiper.
Come on.
And this is my sacrifice of worship and sacrifice of praise. And God moves. We know the word of God talks about it. God moves on your sacrifice of praise. And just obedience to my leaders. Trust your leaders. I'll be judged on my obedience to my leadership, to my leaders. And as a leader, I'll be judged on, leading people. But I need to, God will ask me what I did with, what I was asked to do.
Yeah. Paul even says actually, not everybody should be leaders.
No.
Be careful what you wish for. Because if you are, it's actually a harsh judgment
it's
for
a
leaders.
harsher judgment. And you should feel that. When you talk about the weight of leadership, it is very little to do with your actual practical to-do list. It was to do with the responsibility of leading people well and being diligent. So I think that's how I try and keep myself grounded in who I am, but it's in who I am in God. I am a worshiper. And if that changes season to season, that's okay. And sometimes it feels like it fits me better. And sometimes it feels like it doesn't fit me better. And then maybe it's just a higher sacrifice.
Great.
A higher sacrifice of praise.
Amazing. Brilliant. I'm loving this. What about some funny stories? What do you have in the archive? Or maybe even take this opportunity. We know our current youth pastor, Joel Richards, is actually your little brother.
He is.
Your baby brother. Not many people know that.
Talk about legacies.
I know, right?
So I was the youth pastor and now he's the youth pastor I know. He's 9 years younger than me. So I have lots of stories about him. I don't know if I want to say him. Nah, he will tell you stories of me bullying him, pushing him down the stairs in a laundry basket and various other things when he was younger. But I don't know if I've got many funny stories about him. I've had some faux pas, but they're all pretty unrepeatable.
Not for the podcast.
Not for the
You have to see you on a Sunday. Hey, what's that one story?
Do you know what? Come and see me once about something I said at a women's conference.
Great. Come on.
That's funny and goes down in history.
If you're an international listener or further afield than here in wonderful Manchester, this is your opportunity to come. Come visit us on a Sunday. We've got women's conferences, we've got leadership conferences, we've got youth camps, loads of things happening. Come over and you can hear.
A funny story from youth ministry, though, is when we were in our old building in Mary Street, which is just down the road, started in a really small building, did 5 services. I was running the youth ministry at the time, and we wanted a bonfire. So we thought, we'll just have a bonfire. Why don't we just have one on the car park?
Nice.
And I didn't know that tarmac, it kind of melts when it gets hot, right? So I didn't know this. So we had this bonfire, and as we've got this bonfire and the kids are loving it, and come on, it was like 2000 and whatever, so risk assessments.
I mean,
they were like a luxury. Do you know what I mean? And we didn't have them. So we did this fire, and I was like, I can smell like tar. And Justin Dring was on my youth team, and he was like, yeah, I think the car part's melting. So I was like, everybody get in the building. So we got him in the building, and we were like trying to put this fire out. And there was a huge hole in the car park.
Jeez.
And I was like, Pastor Glenn has always taught me that it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. So I kind of went with that. So I got one of our youth team that Sunday. So this was Friday night. That Sunday, we parked 2 cars over the hole in the car park from our youth team, because I was like, we can't show the team this until after Sunday. Let's get Sunday done. Everyone would be like, woo, Sunday was awesome.
Right.
And then I'll be like, P.S., we've ruined the car park. So we waited till Sunday night when we moved the cars. And I was like, funny story. We may have just caused lots of damage.
That's jokes.
So that was one of them. Oh gosh, loads of leadership funnies. Emailed a complaint to Pastor Glenn about somebody who I had to work with, but I didn't send it to Pastor Glenn. I sent it to the person I was complaining about.
Oh,
so awkward. Yeah, Pastor Glenn was like, I said, what do I do? And he said, apologize. So there's quite a few funnies.
I love that. Well, one of the other things that Pastor Glenn always says is, if the youth ministry isn't breaking stuff, there's something wrong there.
True story.
A youth ministry that's breaking stuff is a good youth ministry.
He once said to me, you don't break enough in the youth ministry, because I was the youth pastor. And he said, you don't break enough stuff. And I said, nah, you just don't hear about it. And he was like, okay, cool. We fixed it. We had like the color of every paint. All the paint on the walls, we bought paint pots. So then we trashed it on a Friday. We would just repaint it, hide it back in the youth cupboard, the paint. So
what he doesn't know won't hurt us.
Yeah, totally.
Great philosophy right there. Amazing. Well, like I said, we're talking about leadership, and your level of seniority has like probably the highest you can be in our organization, bar being our senior pastors, and we're appreciative of that. And it seems like you have an infinite to-do list, but you're a finite human being. True. How do you balance and rectify an infinite to-do list while being a very finite person?
Okay. I think there's some practical things you do. I mean, obviously we've talked about delegation previous to that.
Yep.
I think you have to ask yourself some questions. What are the things I should be doing, or what are the things I can delegate?
Great.
That's really, really important. Not just to release people and give other people an opportunity, but to release yourself in the things that only you can do. And I work best with a team of people, and a team of people ideally who know me. So over the years, throughout the years, there's been people who I've worked with who are the same, because they know me and it's helpful. So they can say, someone else can do that. You need to do this.
Great.
And I think if you're serving a leader, that's a really great advice to say. If you know that you can take something off their plate, take it off their plate.
Great.
So that's one thing. We read a book a while ago as a staff called One Thing. Do you remember that book?
I do, yeah.
It's going to come back to me who wrote it in a minute, but maybe we can put that in the link. And it's great. The whole premise of the book is asking yourself this question: what is one thing I can do today that will make everything else easier?
Great.
And it's this idea of lining up the dominoes. So what's one thing that I can get sorted that will line up the dominoes? And that might be creating a to-do list and working out what you can delegate. And then the next day, suddenly you feel like, I can get loads done because I've delegated. I think being organized, there's nothing, being organized.
This was a long time ago. I don't know if you can remember. I can only remember parts of it. We did a leadership session where you were like, good leaders delegate, automate, and then there's a third one ending in 8, and I can't remember what it is.
Delegate, automate.
And something else. Potentially
maybe eliminate. Yeah, maybe eliminate in terms of what you're getting distracted by. I definitely would say distractions are huge. Sometimes we're doing stuff we don't need to do. Some things are important. When you do kind of the brackets, what's important, urgent, what's just, you got to just go through that. But that all comes with the question, what's the one thing I can do today? What should I be doing today? You should don't try not to live in the urgent. And also just I'm a firm believer that you can grow your capacity. So keep growing your capacity, and your capacity can be with your team. Like if you've got people who work with you or around you, or if you're a team member, other people who can help you. That's another way to grow your capacity. But personally grow your capacity, become better at what you do, train yourself in what you do, be more organized. The list goes on and on and on forever, and just make sure you're feeding your soul.
Great.
So if you aren't an admin person and you're like, I just die doing admin, but you've got to get admin done. That wasn't pointed at you, but if you die doing admin, make sure that you've got something. Don't go, right, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday's admin, because Thursday you're going to be so sad you can't do anything. else. And also know that you got the most kind of energy and willpower in the morning.
Yeah.
So willpower isn't infinite. You will run out of that. So leave the stuff you love doing,
To the end of the day.
love doing, guys, till the end of the day, because it requires less energy and less kind of motivation from you. So get your meetings done that you need to do. I put creativity at the front of the day because it needs my whole brain in that, and I leave everything that's a bit more automated for me at the end of the day, or the end of the week.
Craig Rochelle has his leadership podcast. I'm a super fan, if you can't tell.
Yeah, I was like, this is...
We're not sponsored, I promise. But he has an episode on the energy tanks, and he talks about how we have mental energy, physical energy, spiritual energy, and emotional energy, and how he structures his day and his weeks is based on what energy tank is he using and depleting, and what is he filling up. So he's like, on a Monday morning, he's like, physically he's done because he's just had his full day of Sunday, but the day before, preaching, teaching, all the kind of stuff that he does. So he prioritizes like resting physically and like, you know, refilling himself emotionally. So he does that as a family day. Then later on in the afternoon, he'll go out, work out, because that helps him mentally after, like, again, Sunday's very mentally exhausting, but like, so he just plans his whole week. Like sometimes he does meetings, gym, family, social, all these kind of things.
Yeah, I was going to say, I am in my late 30s now. And one of the things, a lesson is just know yourself. Learn how you work. Some stuff you will never be good at. And that is okay. You know, get yourself as good as you can possibly be at admin. Yeah. But also maybe just find people who love admin and say, hey, can you come and help me? Because then you're adding to that. Also work from rest. So just make sure that you know, one of the roles I used to run the Audacious College. So when it was called Protégé. And one of the sessions we talked about is, you know, learning how to rest. If you have a day off, most people know how to rest when they have a day off because they eventually get to the point of resting. Yeah. But I was saying, you know, it's important that you learn to rest if you have half a day off. And if you have an hour off, how can you rest? And a lot of people will say, oh, I don't, you know, if I'm busy, I struggle to rest in an hour. But try and work out if I've only got an hour off to rest, how can I rest? You know, don't wait for the holiday. Just wait for a couple of hours and then say, right, this is what feeds my soul. Whether or not it's walking around the city, getting a good coffee, finding a person to talk to. Know what renews that in you. And you will find your capacity will grow when you do that. Yeah, no, that's super key. And I think in today's like hustle culture, with a lot of our young adults are a part of, like that's not always like intrinsic into your thinking. Yeah. So that's good to know. I think even for me, like a lot of my work is very mentally like, you know, engaging. So that at the end of the day, I'm like mentally exhausted. Yeah. Physically, I probably am a little bit tired, but I'm like, I force myself to go to the gym because I know mentally it just decompresses me. Yeah, great. So then I wake up a lot fresher the next day. I might be a little bit more tired, but I find physical tiredness in my current rhythm of work. I can fix that easy with a good night of sleep, and I've got a couple of days off coming in a second. But like mentally is what I need to keep myself sharp. And I know the gym does that for me. Yeah, and emotionally, just make sure you keep yourself emotionally and relationally. Just know yourself, guys. If you're depleted, work out how you can build that back up. Great.
Well, we know many sayings that, like, you know, no one person is like built by themselves. Like we need people around us. We need relationships, people who pour into us, lead us, guide us. And you even mentioned it. What role have mentors played in your growth as a leader? And is that still something that you have now? Do you still have, I know you're probably more mentor than mentee in a lot of your relationships, but I'd imagine you probably still have some people you are under their tutelage, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. I think early on I realized you don't know what you don't know. I also know that if you're in the same boat, people can't help you. So early on I was like, mentoring is really, really important. Mark and Emily Foster were my youth pastors in our previous church. So I think early on, they became just key people in my life to know me and to mentor me. And as we've grown, obviously, you know, I got married and I've had children. So in terms of stage of life, there's an element where you kind of grow into a similar stage of life as your mentors. Because when you're in youth, it's like if you're 16, your mentor is like...
Stage of life are very different.
Yeah, you're like, oh my gosh, this person's got a car and they do whatever. And then slowly you grow. And I think that's just maturing, where you're thinking you might be at the same stage of life, but I'm still going to sit under their mentorship. And the same with Pastor Glenn and Sophia. Like Pastor Sophia is a mentor in my life, and My goodness, sitting under people. I think understanding that it's both a discipline, but it is spiritual as well.
Yeah.
So we know that the anointing flows down. We know that people get breakthrough on behalf of us. And in some ways, pick mentors. I've picked mentors where a little bit selfishly, because I'm thinking, yeah, I want a bit of that in my life.
Yeah.
I want a bit of, Pastor Glenn and Sophia, they have an anointing for buildings. We know that. We know we're going to own buildings in every city that we have a church in.
Amen.
But kind of what you see is in their houses, just so happen they managed to get this, and they just so housed in this and this and this. And I thought, we literally have been receiving that because I feel like because we've tucked ourselves under them as mentors. So it's vital. It becomes a discipline when you're a child or a young person. I feel like your mentors chase you because they're your youth leaders. Come on, youth leaders, all you youth leaders who chase your young people around. Yeah. And then as you become a young adult, YAs, it's your responsibility.
The list of people who are chasing you is very short.
I mean, if anybody is still chasing you at 20,
that's a problem.
Well, what is that person doing? I'm not chasing people. I'm chasing my kids, but I'm not chasing people now. If you want me to mentor you, or you want me to sit with you and talk and have a coffee, chase me. And thank you for all those people who do, because I love sitting with people and getting time. And I love mentoring people. And just find people who consistently know you.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it. Like, we've had some good conversations where I've said, you said this before. What have you done with this? And you're like, oh yeah. And that's the benefit of having accountability. And knowing where people are at and being able to look at somebody and say, hey, you're not right. What's going on? Because they can
see your patterns. They can see you in and out of season.
And they know your strengths.
Yeah.
And they know your weaknesses.
Yeah.
And they know your tired faces. And they know your happy face. And I think the Bible says we mourn with those who mourn, and we celebrate with those who celebrate. And that is, to me, the picture of mentoring. It's
quite a vulnerable thing, having a mentor, isn't it?
Yeah, because you when you're on the mountaintops, mentors are there to share the view, I guess. And you're like, how good is life? This is awesome. But when you're in the pit, it's too late to dig a well.
True.
If you haven't dug a well when you're in the pit, if you haven't dug a well by that point when you need your desperation, you're so mentally, emotionally, everything drained, you can't be digging then.
No.
So what I guess I would say to YAs is, mountain hops experiences are great, but you got to have somebody in your life that when you're at the lowest of the low, you barely even need to call them. They're just there.
They're just there.
They look at your face, or they know what's going on, and they are just there. And they're the people. Me and Emily Foster, we have a bench that as soon as in COVID we were allowed out, we met on this bench. And we reckon there should be a plaque on the bench, because that got us through COVID.
Great.
Those we were there, just there. Sometimes we sat in silence, sometimes we talked, but it's having that mentor. And as you get older, also that person just being your friend and being in it. So, yeah.
I think it's so important for any young man or young woman to have somebody who speaks into their life.
Yeah.
Not just about church, like we're talking about leadership, but it's not just church leadership here. I think it shapes who you become.
Yeah.
I've had the privilege of having, some long-standing mentors. Some of my dad is one of those as well, but equally some people within the church, some people outside of the church who've I owe an unpayable debt.
Yeah.
Because they grew me, molded me, and it was painful. It's tough, but gosh, I'm so grateful for it, because I'm better off for it.
Yeah, that is what discipleship is.
Yeah,
discipleship. The word comes from discipline, and discipleship is that it's people saying, "No, you got that wrong," and also you can only be discipled to the level of your vulnerability.
Yeah.
So you need to go there with people. You need to tell them what you're doing. You need to tell them where you're at. If you truly want to see transformation, and we know God works through people. And then you will also have just this absolute privilege of discipling and mentoring other people. It's a total privilege to sit in that role with people, in that role with other people now, and I love it. I love doing that.
Amen. Come on. All right, let's switch it up a little bit now, I guess. So, in our current social political climate, I actually found that it's preferred for women to be in positions of leadership.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of rhetoric of the patriarchy must fall, and, all of that kind of stuff. And so I'm seeing women grow to be in a lot of significant positions of leadership. And I want to ask that hasn't always been the case, right?
Yes. No.
And more so in the church. We know, the history of the church hasn't always been great on that front. But what's been your experience? Or right now, a lot of our church love you, we adore you, we're great, it's amazing. But has your church leadership experience always been, has there been any contention with your leadership? I guess is what I'm asking as a woman.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been so blessed to be under Pastor Glenn and Sophia's leadership. First and foremost, just to say that Glenn and Soph have always celebrated female and male leadership. I think in the church I grew up in, or churches that I was around, it was probably modeled to me that if you were a female in leadership, it's because your husband was in leadership, which was interesting for me because I think I felt early on, I got baptized in the Holy Spirit at kids camp, kids camps and youth camps when I was 9.
Wow.
And really early on, I felt a call to ministry. And the church I grew up in, there wasn't really people in ministry. Everyone was there was the leader of the church, but even he wasn't paid. And so I just knew I was called to God and called to ministry. And it was actually only as I grew up that I didn't see it particularly modeled, that women in leadership roles when I was younger. But then when I started to go into other churches, I did start, the church I grew up in where I met Mark and Emily and Pastor Glenn and Sophia, I saw female leaders and I was thinking, great. However, it probably was still people in couples. So that was something I was looking at. And thinking, I need to marry a man in ministry? Do I need to marry a man in ministry if I want to be in ministry? So that was interesting and kind of propelled me into looking at the Bible and looking at leadership. And I've always been a leader in the sense of going first, confident. So I think I just found myself in leadership roles. So I guess I'm saying yes and no. It has been, when I was younger, it wasn't modeled to me. And I kind of went looking for it.
Great. You're a very strong person. Like, you are not timid or shy or afraid to kind of back your corner, what makes you such a great leader. What about for some of our girls who are like, gosh, I feel this call of ministry, but I'm terrified. Like, I feel like there's a giant in front of me. Yeah. And I'm like, little David, how do I face this?
I think,
is it a personality thing? Is it you have it, you don't? Or?
It's not a personality thing. I think my insecurities or my kind of I'll fight or flight. I'm fight, and that is a personality thing. So I'll stay and fight, and I'll fight my insecurities. But I also know that if you're feeling intimidated, that's okay, and you might deal with that differently. I think the thing about David, right? I was thinking about David actually this morning. I was thinking about David and Goliath. The thing about David is what I said earlier. He was a worshiper and is a worshiper. He had full right. We're talking about females in leadership here, and I'll come back to the girls in a second. But he was a man. David was a man, but he was at the back of the queue. He was the forgotten one in the fields. Like, even his dad, the one person
who should have been his champion,
championing him, was like, nah, that's all my sons. Oh, hang on, did I have another one? Yeah, I think it's in the field. Like, he was the back of the queue. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And the thing about David is he got to the field where Goliath was, and he saw the same thing. He saw Goliath, which everybody else was looking at Goliath, but he saw a different thing. And he saw his God. He saw an opportunity for God to break through. And the reason is because he was a worshiper. Yeah. And I think I go back to the same thing, girls and guys, but we're talking about the girls, just be in the place of worship. That's Allow right. God to speak into who you are. It's not a personality thing. Offer your gift willingly, because Proverbs says the gift will make way for the giver. Offer your gift willingly. And if that star isn't a leader, that's fine. Just serve. And God will elevate you into a position of leadership. If you feel intimidated, that's okay. Do it intimidated. I'm guessing David felt intimidated. Yeah. But he knew the truth.
Come on.
And he had every reason to feel like he shouldn't have been the one doing it. There was a whole array of people who he was just like, why is nobody doing this? And I think, let's kind of put that into our position of being girls and thinking, maybe I shouldn't do this, or every person in this role I've ever seen has been a guy or whatever. There's loads of reasons. But you know your God, and you know the truth, and you're a worshiper, and you know who you are.
That's right.
So I just say, just step into leadership and get courage. Have people around you who will put courage in you.
Yeah.
And say, no, that is who you are. You are called to this.
That's good. Just as you're saying that, like the story of David, Samuel like said, he says no to all the brothers, and he says to David that, you are the anointed one, you will be the king. Yeah. Which is insane to tell a 14-year-old boy, right?
Right.
But he takes that, but he doesn't also like then start walking around like he owns the place. He's like probably like wrestling with that, like, gosh, me, I'm the youngest of all. I'm not enough. I'm my oldest brother's head and shoulder, all of this, Saul's head and it's crazy.
And what I love about that is what David actually does with that word, which is really him knowing who he is, right? Because so he's just been told who he is. And what he does with that word is he just goes back to serving where he was serving. He goes back to serving his father's house. Yeah. He goes back to looking after the sheep. He goes back to writing the songs. Like, how many of the Psalms were written from that field? Before he even did anything, he went back to that. And then when an opportunity presented itself, he took the opportunity. Yeah. He was like, Goliath, you come at me with sword and spear, but I come at you in the name of the Lord. So I would just say, if you know who you are, don't force it.
That's right.
Give it. Give your gift, and it will make way for you. And when opportunity appears, you won't even, you'll even see it as an opportunity. You'll just see it as, this is who I am.
See, even as you're saying that, like, the gift makes way for the giver. Like, it wasn't his, like, like slaying the giant that got him into the throne room, right? It was him playing the harp.
That's right.
Saul was tormented by demons and he couldn't sleep. As Jesse has a little boy, he plays the harp, bring him in. That's what got him into the throne room. And the gift makes way for the giver.
And he practiced his gift. And he did it in the field. He did it in the quiet place. He did it with God. He did it in front of some smelly sheep. And then it made way and ushered him in to the
we could be preaching right now. We're both preachers. So we're trying not to
we're like,
have conversations.
Respond if you want to respond right now, guys. Now I'm saying
say
girls
yes in the chat.
Girls and guys, just serve and worship. Like, if I could, maybe we'll leave it till the end, but serving and worshiping.
Powerful,
keep going.
Powerful. All right. You kind of mentioned at the beginning that you were like, to be in ministry, do I have to be married? First question. To be in ministry, do I have to be married to a man who's also in ministry? I guess second question. And if we can just, like, open your front door a little bit. Yeah. You and Wayne. Wayne is a great man, part of our church. He's a drummer, brilliant leader, leads the family, loves his daughters, all of that kind of stuff. But, like, on the front-facing ministry leadership, like, we're looking at you. Yeah. You're like the leader in that sense.
Yeah. So firstly, no, you don't need to be married to be in ministry.
Great.
Jesus,
single leader right
Jesus here. Did not get married. Okay. So Jesus was not married. The Bible actually says, don't, if you, it's better not to be. And don't be, but if you have to be married. Okay. So just permission to not be, feel that pressure. So I obviously grew up thinking, do I need to be in ministry with my husband? We did youth ministry together, but I was employed to be the youth pastor, and he was married to me. So in some ways it was a little bit of the opposite, weirdly, to what I thought would happen. Yeah. Wayne is a director in his own company, but it's a construction company. So he works in kind of building law, and I don't do that with him. So, he does that. He is a drummer, which means he actually serves. My role is the creative director, so he actually serves on one of the teams that I oversee. I actually lead him in that capacity.
How did you guys figure out that dynamic? Like, either within yourselves or even other people's perceptions? Sure. Because you can imagine, like, you guys are at a conference and says, the Adkins are here, and whoever, Billy Bob, whatever, comes to speak to Wayne instead of you, when everyone else in the room knows that actually Hannah wears. I'm joking.
As in Hannah's in the ministry role. And I think Wayne is very, very secure in.
We need a whole other podcast.
I know, right? Male
security.
Oh my gosh,
we need that.
He's very secure, and I think he releases me into my ministry. Right. So we are in ministry together in some ways, because I can't be. The man is the head of the household. So when I married him, I knew that he would have to release me into ministry, and it isn't necessarily. I guess in some ways it's a partnership, and we've had to work out what that means. So Wayne is very secure. So he will, if someone's talking to him, he'll often say, Hannah, come, Hannah works for the church. Come and speak about that. So he'll very quickly align people. And I don't necessarily get, agitated or anything like that, frustrated when if people speak to him and assuming that, because that may be the template, like mine was the template.
Does that even happen though? I might have just been
Occasionally it might happen, yeah. But to be honest, lots of people don't know what anyone does, do they? It's all called different things in different churches. So you kind of end up saying, oh, this is what I do, or this is my involvement. So I think, yeah, it's not, but it has brought some tension in our marriage occasionally. I wasn't he's always been involved in worship. He's always been the drummer, and I became the creative director, and he actually was the worship pastor at the time. Oh, wow. So I became his direct line manager. Mm-hmm. And the tension of that, we just made sure we put really clear boundaries in place in terms of when we're talking, are you talking about this as my line manager now? Or are we having a conversation as Hannah and Wayne?
Husband and wife, yeah.
And husband and wife. So we just made sure we were really clear on that. And first and foremost, I'm his wife and he is my husband. So everything else kind of flows from the health of that relationship.
Amen.
So yeah, no, it's great. And I want to encourage you, you don't have to be married to somebody in ministry to be in ministry, and the same with the guys. And let's just have healthy relationships where we're releasing each other into what we are supposed to be doing and called to be doing.
Amen. Come on. Nah, I love our house, and I think we're just empowering and releasing of people, and there is no one size fits all. No. Like it's very bespoke, and I think that's what the church is. It's like God calls men and women to lead his church, and he doesn't call like a group or an organization or a system. He like empowers individuals in different ways, in different contexts. It's brilliant. Mm-hmm. I want to get into some Bible.
Okay.
It's always pretty good to do that.
Should be.
And these are potentially some verses that over the years have been, weaponized, taken out of context, and I want to hear have these firstly ever been used against you, and what do you think of that? What's your response to that? And how do we actually tear down this narrative that women shouldn't be in leadership? It might not be an overarching prevailing theory or topic of conversation anymore, but it does still happen. And I've still been engaging with a lot of people who are like, oh, I can never listen to a woman because the Bible says you shouldn't learn from a woman, which seems crazy, but people out there believe it. So the first verse I want to read is 1 Timothy 2 verse 11 to 12. It says, I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man. She must be silent. Now, first of all, read the Bible in context. Never take a verse in by itself. Read 3 or 4 verses before, even read the full chapter. And so what's the actual book trying to say? Who is it written to? Who's it written by? What time is it written for? Context, culture, all of these things are so important when reading the Bible. So that was pretty much my answer. My answer is context. Context is really important. Context is actually king with this stuff. So you have to look at it. We can take Bible verses out of context, and then it can be really, really harming and dangerous, especially when you're talking about a certain group of people being silent. I think that you have to look into it and read into that. In this specific context, I think the context is that the women, a little bit about this as well, but the women at the time were teaching, and they were not teaching what was correct. So they were kind of teaching hearsay. I think we were talking earlier about they were illiterate, they couldn't read, and they weren't sitting under the teaching. So they were teaching hearsay, or it was false teaching, because the Bible in 1 Corinthians and in 1 Timothy, it talks about women praying and prophesying. So in some ways, when you take it in context, you have to read that and say, well, hang on a second. He's later on saying that women are praying and prophesying, and he actually doesn't rebuke them for that. No,
he actually talks about covering their heads, which is also in a different context. Okay, so you can't just say, "Oh, women have got to be silent because of this verse," and then later on skip over the verse where you're saying, "Oh, the women were praying and prophesying." Book. And in Acts 2, it says that in the last days, my spirit prophesying. Yeah, and it says that they will prophesy sons and daughters. Yeah. It doesn't say just sons. It says sons and daughters. So you can't take one verse because you like it across the board with all verses. Listen to me. You can't take one verse because you like it, because it suits you, and be like, this is the truth, and then not take the other verses. So I think we have to be careful with that. It hasn't ever been used against me necessarily. I think it probably was when I was younger, a child in the church. It may have been used to form a culture, but it's never been necessarily used against me. I don't know if I can be silent. No, I'm joking. I can be silent. But no, so just take it in context. It obviously talks about, women praying and prophesying. But at the time, what he was addressing in the church was that there was women talking. Hearsay, gossip, talking. And the women, if you read it, sounded quite out of control.
Yeah.
And at that point, you should be addressing that.
Yeah.
And it happened to be at the time the women. But obviously we can still learn from every verse in the Bible.
Yeah, yeah. The second verse which you touched on, I'll just read it out, is 1 Corinthians 14 verse 35 says, if they desire to learn, it's talking about women here, if they desire to learn, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is shameful for a woman to speak in church.
Yeah, so again, it's context, isn't it, in terms of where the women were allowed to go at the time.
Yeah.
And I guess it's touching on the fact that where they should be talking is their husband who's sat under the teaching. And again, we can learn, like, where are you getting your teaching from?
Yeah.
Who are you listening to? We always say here at Audacious, listen to the every preacher that we have here, but go and read your Bible. Read for yourself. And they didn't have this. They were, the equivalent of that is going to your husband and saying, hey, teach me, let me listen to you. And that was their relationship. So, the equivalent to us, I guess, would be that, is go and read your Bible.
Yeah, because in this context and culture, like from the age of like 6, every Jewish boy is taught the Torah, the first 5 books of the, the Bible, the Pentateuch. And by 13, you can recite everything word for word. You're supposed to be able to. And those who are like the best of the best of the best of the best of the best go on to become rabbis and teachers and all that kind of thing. But like at the base, every Jewish man would have good grips and understanding of the religious texts. So anybody would. And so, and that didn't extend to women at that time because of, all the other things. And that's why it's saying speak to your husband.
Yeah, and the context, I mean, just hearing that, the context of what Jesus did and came to do, suddenly you're like, my goodness, Jesus was incredible. The woman at the well, suddenly when you hear the context of what women were allowed to do and weren't allowed to do, you realize how taboo Jesus was and how he just
breaking culture
and breaking through culture and even talking to women. And it's just incredible to think that that's what Jesus came to do. And I guess what he is saying in this verse is actually wisdom. It's about wisdom, about where you get your teaching from, who you get your teaching from. And again, it's about your husband and wife and that relationship that you have. So
yeah. And the Bible is full of so many examples of women doing incredible things. You've got Phoebe, you've got Dorcas, you've got Ruth, you've got Esther, you've got Sarah, you've got literally countless accounts of women like in key situations where the narrative of the Bible wouldn't, of course God can do everything, he doesn't use anyone, but would not have gone as we see it today if it was not for the position of women being empowered by the Holy Spirit and used in brilliant ways.
That's right. Jesus grew in a womb of a woman. And Mary said, let it be. What if she had not? She said, let it be. And, that is incredible. Mary Magdalene, when she saw the grave was empty,
the YA Deep Dive podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, Pastor Hannah. Thank you so much for being here.
It's been great.
We're excited for everything that's coming up in your lives. Don't stay quiet. Let us know what you're liking, what you don't like, what's going well, what's not going well, and how we can pray for you. We love you guys. God bless. See you next time.
Bye.